Well, good evening, everyone. Good to be with you tonight on this Thursday Night Live. And another good day of sunshine for us. Good to see folk already in the chat there. Colin and Susan, Brian and Ann and Pete. First one in. Good to see you folks tonight. I'll give a little bit of time for some folk to come on in. We will be back to our normal services this coming Sunday. So I know a lot of people are wondering about that because we've been away now for quite some time, but we will be back as per normal on Sunday. So Sunday morning services at the hall at 10 o'clock, and we'll be back for the afternoon or evening service, whichever you want to call it, at 5. So looking forward to getting things back to normal. I think everyone is on their road to recovery with the flu and the viruses that have been going around. I'm sure the sunny skies have helped us a little bit, at least, to feel better, get out into the sun, get some fresh air as well. That's always good. And so tonight we're continuing on in our study of the book of Joshua. We probably won't be in this for too many more weeks because the book of Joshua goes into the dividing up of the land toward the latter part of the book, and we probably won't spend much time on that. Everyone has a good Bible map, usually in their Bible, that can show them the divisions of the land as it was carved up according to the word that Moses had given to Joshua. So we won't be spending a lot of time on that, but we probably will have, one or two more lessons from this book anyway, and then we will be moving on. So tonight we're in chapter 10, and so we'll be looking at that chapter. It's quite a long chapter, but it does deal with a lot of battles and victories, mostly just recording them for our sakes. But we, again, in tonight's lessons, we get to see the mighty hand of God in fighting for Israel as they go into the land of promise, and even the sun standing still. So there's much to be had from this study, and like I said, we'll probably have one, maybe two more, but at least one more lesson, and then we'll be moving on to another study. On this coming Sunday, we'll be back in the book of Hebrews. Just started our study in the book of Hebrews last Sunday. We had that service, of course, on YouTube, but we'll be going through the book of Hebrews. Very, very good study, and I'm looking forward to that one myself, to get to go into it in a bit more depth. So something to look forward to for this Sunday, the book of Hebrews, and that will of course introduce us back to the hall for the first time in a couple of weeks, mainly due to just illness amongst the congregation, some getting over illness, some unfortunately moving into illness over those 2 weeks. But I think now we're at least on our way back, so that's a good thing, and sort of get the regular order of things started back up again. Well, we're at 7:05, so it's probably a good time to make a start. It looks like we've got quite a few in, which is great. It's good to see. In that time that you're away, you always hope for the best, that things will, that they'll hold together. But folk have really been good about it, and especially giving us or yesterday, I should say, Wednesday night. Wasn't really looking forward to going out in the cold evening air, and so that it was good to have just one last chance to get over it. This gives us a few more days. All right, so let's go straight into it, shall we? Joshua chapter 10 is our text, and it's sad to hear about Haley, but certainly we'll be praying for her and wishing for the best. It's not fun to be sick, and certainly not with having COVID. But that's good. She's at her place isolating. That's the way it ought to be. All right, now chapter 10. Chapter 10. Let's look at the first 4 verses of this chapter. My voice is still a little bit croaky, but it's only because of the cough, which is sort of the last thing to go. But that it's all right. It doesn't hurt or anything, so it's all good. Chapter 10. Now it came to pass when Adonai-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, had heard how Joshua had taken Ai and had utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and her king, so he had done to Ai and her king, and how that the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them, that they feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, as one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all the men thereof were mighty. Wherefore Adonai-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, sent unto Hoham, king of Hebron, and unto Piram, king of Jarmuth, and unto Japhia, king of Lachish, and unto Debir, king of Eglon, saying, Come up unto me, and help me, that we may smite Gibeon. It hath made peace with Joshua and with the children of Israel. So there was, sorry, I'm just getting a call. I should have put silent on that. My apologies for that. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. It's interesting here that the people who had realized that they would be destroyed by Israel, and that they took their life into their own hands to make peace with the nation of Israel, that is, the people of Gibeon, that they were also looked upon as a mighty nation, as it was as one of the royal cities, and the men of war there were mighty and great. And so it upset the king of Jerusalem, Adonai-Zedek, when he heard that they had made peace with Israel, because obviously Israel was determined and bent to go into that country and to take it as their own, since it had been given to them by their God. So these kings who band together determine, well, they have turned against us in aligning themselves with Israel, so we will destroy them. We will gather together our armies, the 5 armies, and we will go against Gibeon, and we will destroy it. So, I mean, it's logical. It's what you would think would come about from making a league with someone who's in the land. Now, I don't suppose that that Joshua or any of the elders of Israel at the time thought about all of these consequences, but they, as we saw from that period when they did make peace with Israel, they weren't thinking very much. They certainly weren't approaching God for his input on the matter, and had obviously been duped. They had been beguiled. I like the fact that the term that was used to describe what happened to them is the same term that was used by Eve, when Satan beguiled her and made the thing which was for her death to appear to be something that was to be desired and that would make one wise. But so this same term is used. So they were beguiled. They were led down the garden path by the people of Gibeon, and as a result, a peace was made. And so Adonai-Zedek is not going to let this pass by. Now, Gibeon was on a bit of a hill, I wouldn't call it a mountain by any stretch of the imagination, but it was in the hills where Gibeon was, and there was a valley, and on the other side of the valley, these 5 kings pitched against Gibeon. They set up their camp, and they prepared to go down and take Gibeon. The idea is in those days that the battles would happen usually in a area suited for it, like in this case a valley between 2 hills, and so they were virtually facing destruction, and Gibeon knew it. So they sent message urgently to Joshua, calling upon to him to help. He says in chapter 10, verse 4, "Come up unto me and help me, that we may smite Gibeon," he says, "for it hath made peace with Joshua." Therefore, the 5 kings of the Amorites and the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, the king of Eglon gathered themselves together and went up, they and all their hosts, and encamped before Gibeon and made war against it. And the men of Gibeon said unto Joshua to the camp to Gilgal, saying, "Slack not thy hand from thy servants. Come up to us quickly and save us and help us, for the kings of the Amorites that dwell in the mountains are gathered together against us." And so it's important to note these 5 kings were in the mountains. They were Amorites, but they were in the mountains as they are gathered together against us. So Joshua ascended from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, and all the mighty men of valor. And the Lord said unto Joshua, "Fear them not, for I have delivered them into thine hand. There shall not a man of them stand before thee." Now let's stop right there. So you remember when the people were duped by the people of Gibeon into the leaders of Israel anyway, making peace with them. That they had said that they had lived in a country far away. Their food was moldy, their shoes were clotted onto their feet. The travel was so far. But it turns out that they were only 3 days away. So on the 3rd day of walking, the people came to Gibeon, to the actual city that they dwelt in. And it's important to note that. So it's at least more than a day's journey to Gibeon from Gilgal, where Israel was camped at the time. And so when Joshua gets the message, God says to them, "Fear them not, for I have delivered them unto thine hand. There shall not a man of them stand before thee." So Joshua has made contact with God about this issue. And we don't hear any more about Joshua lacking contact with the great captain of the host, because from here on out, Joshua does everything at the behest and the beck and call of the Lord. So Joshua therefore came unto them suddenly. So these 5 kings are encamped and they're prepared for war. They know where Israel is encamped. They know that at Gilgal, they know it's going to take them a while to make their way there, even if they do come to fight for Gibeon. But Joshua comes upon them suddenly. And the Bible tells us that they marched all night. So they marched for a full nighttime march and came upon these 5 kings suddenly. And just imagine you're there to fight and to do battle, and out of nowhere comes a great force, a force greater than your own, to support this what was in fact just a large city of people. And so they caught them unawares. It says there in chapter 10, verse 10, and the Lord discomfited them before Israel and slew them with a great slaughter at Gibeon, and chased them along the way that goeth up unto Beth Horon, and smote them to Azekah and unto Makkedah. And it came to pass, as they fled from before Israel and were in the going down to Beth Horon, that the Lord cast down great stones from heaven upon them unto Azekah, and they died. And there were more which died with the hailstones than they whom the children of Israel slew with the sword. Then spake Joshua unto the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel, and he said in the sight of all Israel, Sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves of their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and hasted not to go down about a whole day. And there was no day like it before or after it, that the Lord hearkened unto the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. And Joshua returned. Now, what an amazing sight. Not only the surprise element of Joshua and the troops, all of the fighting men marching all night to arrive and to catch them unawares, but also as they fled the battle, and Israel, the fighting men of Israel, followed after them, and were simply making havoc in the ranks. And so they were running, they were on the run, and God then fought for Israel. And he sent the hailstones upon the men, those 5 kings and their people. And the Bible says that more were killed with the hailstones than were killed with swords. So God is openly fighting for the nation of Israel. And of course, Gibeon, who had made their league with Israel, is saved, and the cities are preserved. But Joshua and his troops continue on the battle, and of course, the sun is on its way down, and Joshua, and I love this part of it, that he did this within earshot of all the people, of all Israel, of all the troops. Sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon. Now, you must have a great confidence to be able to say such things. It had never happened before, nor has it happened since. That the sun would stay in its place and the moon in its place about the space of a whole day, about the time that the sun is normally up above the horizon. The sun and the moon stood still in their place as Israel made havoc of their enemies. It says here in verse 16, but those 5 kings fled and hid themselves in a cave at Makkedah. And of course, this happens regularly. They had run away. Not only had they run away from their own troops and had left them to be destroyed, but they knew what the outcome would be if they were caught. And so they've hid themselves in the cave of Makkedah. And it was told Joshua, saying, the 5 kings are found, and they're hid in a cave at Makkedah. And Joshua said, roll great stones upon the mouth of the cave, and set men by it for to keep them. And stay ye not, but pursue after your enemies, and smite the hindmost of them. Suffer them not to enter into their cities, for the Lord your God hath delivered them into your hand. And it came to pass, when Joshua and the children of Israel had made an end of slaying them with a very great slaughter, till they were consumed, that the rest which remained of them entered into the fenced cities. And all of the people returned to the camp of Joshua at Makkedah in peace. None moved his tongue against any of the children of Israel. Then said Joshua, open the mouth of the cave, and bring out these 5 kings unto me out of the cave. And they did so, and brought forth those 5 kings unto him out of the cave of the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, the king of Eglon. And it came to pass, when they brought out those kings unto Joshua, that Joshua called for all the men of Israel, and said unto the captains of the men of war, which went with him, come near, put your feet upon the necks of these kings. Now this might sound like an odd happening, like an odd occurrence, but it was actually quite a normal thing to parade the vanquished kings. They would often put chains around their neck and bring them back through, showing the victory was complete and that they had the king. A lot of these kings would that had been vanquished would be kept as trophies, kept alive even as trophies, and fed at the tables of the kings that had defeated them. And I think it was just, to continue on the idea of shaming them, and that they had lost the battle, and that all of their troops were dead, and all of that sort of thing. So it was quite a normal thing in the day to parade the kings that had been defeated. This idea of putting the foot upon the neck again shows that there was a conquering, a complete authority. And I like how Joshua, in this instance, he doesn't go to put his neck or his foot rather upon the necks of the kings, but he called for his captains and the men of war which went with him, and says to them, come near, put your feet upon the necks of these kings. And they came near and put their feet upon the necks of them. And Joshua said unto them, fear not, nor be dismayed, for be not dismayed, be strong and of good courage, for thus shall the Lord do unto all your enemies against whom ye fight. Now, just think of Joshua here. He's an older man now. They've defeated these kings in the mountains, and they're just about to go back through and take the cities, destroy them. And so Joshua knows he's an older man, and so he's putting a bit of this honor that God had bestowed upon him God had said to him, no man's going to stand before you all the days of your life. And so Joshua is putting a bit of that honor upon his mighty men, his men of valor who had fought and in this battle. And it says in verse 26, and Joshua in verse 26, and afterward Joshua smote them, that is the 5 kings of the Amorites who had come against him, and hung them on 5 trees, and they were hanging upon the trees until the evening. So finally, on this very, very long day, the sun sets, and at the setting of the sun, the corpses of these 5 kings are taken down from the trees. They're cast into the cave of Makkedah, where they had hidden themselves. And the Bible says that it came to pass, verse 27, at the time of the going down of the sun that Joshua commanded, they took them down off the trees and cast them into the cave wherein they had been hid, and laid great stones in the cave's mouths, which remain unto this very day. And that day Joshua took Makkedah. So he took the city itself and smote it with the edge of the sword, and the king thereof he utterly destroyed them, and the souls that were therein, and he let none remain. And he did he did to the king of Makkedah as he had done to the king of Jericho. Then Joshua passed from Makkedah, and all Israel with him, to Libnah, and fought against Libnah. And the Lord delivered it also, and the king thereof, unto the hand of Israel. And he smote it with the edge of the sword, and all the souls that were therein, he let none remain in it, but did unto the king thereof as he did unto the king of Jericho. And Joshua passed from Libnah, and all Israel with him against it, and fought against it. And the Lord delivered Lachish into the hand of Israel, and which took it on the second day, and smote it with the edge of the sword, and all the souls that were therein, according to all that he had done to Libnah. And Horham, the king of Gezer, came up to help Lachish, and Joshua smote him and his people until he had left him none remaining. And from Lachish Joshua passed unto Eglon, and all Israel with him, and they encamped against it and fought against it. And they took it that day and smote it with the edge of the sword, and all the souls that were therein. He utterly destroyed that day according to all that he had done unto Lachish. And Joshua went up from Eglon, and all Israel with him, unto Hebron, and they fought against it, and they took it and smote it with the edge of the sword, and the king thereof, and all the cities thereof, and the souls that were therein. He left none remaining according to all that he had done unto Eglon, but destroyed it utterly, and all the souls that were therein. And Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, to Debir, and fought against it. And he took it, and the king thereof, and the cities thereof, and they smote them with the edge of the sword, and he utterly destroyed all the souls that were therein. He left none remaining. As he had done to Hebron, so he did to Debir, and the king thereof, as he had done also to Libnah and her king. So Joshua smote all the country of the hills, and of the south, and of the vale, and of the springs, and all their kings. And he left none remaining, but utterly destroyed all that breathed, as the Lord God of Israel commanded. And Joshua smote them from Kadesh Barnea. You'd recognize that name. That was the place where Israel entered in the first time to the land of promise, from Kadesh Barnea even unto Gaza, and all the country of Goshen, even to Gibeon. And all these kings and their land did Joshua take at one time, because the Lord God of Israel fought for Israel. And Joshua returned, and all Israel with him unto the camp of to Gilgal. So a great victory, a great defense of Gibeon, and the hand of God seen at work with the people of Israel. More were killed with the hailstones than were killed by the swords of the people of Israel. And of course, a great miracle, the sun and the moon standing still in their places for about the course of one full day, as Joshua and his troops destroyed the nations that had come against Gibeon, and who had covenanted together against Israel. And so this great victory puts us into a good place here as Joshua goes back to Gilgal with all of the troops. Notice they always go back to that hill, to that place where they encamped as they came across the Jordan River. And this is a place where, of course, they keep their camps, and all of the troops then roll out from that area. So tonight's lesson was a wide-ranging one, and as I said, we've probably only got one or two lessons left in the book of Joshua before we move on forward. But what a great hand, not just to see Joshua, calling upon God, getting the word from God to not fear, but to go against them, that they won't be able to stand against you. But also in the end of this battle, or at least the end of the battle against the five kings, putting some of his honor upon his mighty men of valor and the captains and those that had gone against these kings and their people in battle. Again, the kind of leader that you would want to follow. Not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but a man who understands now, I think, that if they're to win, and they are destined to win, that it will be God who will arrange the victory. All right. Well, I've enjoyed tonight's lesson and enjoyed being with you guys. Good to see you all chatting together in the live chat too. That's a big part of what we do here on Thursday nights. Just trying to make everything a little bit more available to people, and so hopefully we'll have good lessons ahead. And we certainly look forward to being in church on Sunday. So remember, back to our normal services this coming Sunday, and we look forward to being there with everyone and getting to say hello to you all. Well, may God bless you and keep you until that day. We'll see you Sunday, 10 o'clock at the Morayfield East State School. And until then, God bless you. Good night.